Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And we're actually going to try and continue from where we left off last year. So here we go. And it's Parshat, of course, a new Parsha, vaYera. And it started off, just to summarize how far we've gotten, it starts off with Abraham welcoming the three strangers, the three guests, of course, who turn out to be three angels, right? And he shows them hospitality. He and Sarah display a great deal of hospitality and hospitality to strangers. I mean, think that one through and how difficult and challenging that might be, and how often do we, in fact, show hospitality to strangers? That's
Did he know that? Did he know they were angels?
no, he wouldn't have known at the time. I don't
Oh,
believe so. So, let's see, I'm actually having issues here with trying to. I don't know if I need to redo the share, but it's like it's stuck. All right. Well, let's see what I can do here.
I do have a question that I heard a rabbi say the other day, and I can't quite remember the exact thing, but something about that welcoming the neighbor or um, treating the neighbor as yourself. Neighbor is mentioned just a couple of times, and stranger is mentioned 36 times.
Hmm.
Torah.
Hmm.
So I'll go look at my notes again.
Okay, so the word, when it says love your neighbor as yourself, it's the Hebrew is v'ahavta l're'acha kamocha, right? So there, the word is re'ah, and I'm trying to think of what if they use the word ger for stranger, if that is the word they use. But I mean, certainly the word re'ah is not so. There's a certain level of almost friend, right, or companion of the word re'ah, whereas ger definitely has that connotation of stranger, as opposed to re'ah. We're actually going to deal with a different issue today, but I'm going to make the bracha first. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So this is the verse we were looking at the last time and actually spent a bit of time on it. But I went back over it and in fact found some interesting notes in the Silverman translation of the Rashi. And I may just read that to you verbatim to share because this is the difficulty. Notice I've circled this because Rashi comments on that. This little distinction between k'et and ka'et, and I'll try to explain it. It's a grammatical distinction, but it isn't simply a technical issue. It is actually has meaning to it. So, not that that's a big surprise. So here we go. Vayomer, and he said, this is the lead angel, right? He said, Shov ashuv elecha, I shall certainly return to you. And now comes this very difficult expression, ka'et chaya. So ka'et means like the time, right? Or as the time. Chaya, well, normally we translate, you all know that the word chai essentially means life, right? And there was some good discussion last year on this particular thing. And in fact, Janet was part of our group at the time she was attending it, right? And I think she suggested at a time of life, right? But that it's not, it definitely isn't simple, and we'll look at it. So there's quite a lot of ink spilt on this particular expression. V'hine ven l'Sarah, and behold, right, behold, there will be a son to Sarah Ishtecha, your wife. V'Sarah shomat, and Sarah was listening. Literally, it's is listening, right? It's petach ha'oil, at the entrance of the tent, v'hu acharav, and it was behind her. Sorry, behind him, forgive me, behind him. So we'll take a look at the Rashi here. Ka'et chaya, right? So there we go. We're getting right into it. So he says, Ka8. He's commenting the fact that there are no points in this isn't helpful, right? So it says Ka8 hazot. Because Ka8 means in the time. The ka is a definite article, implies, because it's like ka ha 8. And obviously the ha gets elided into the ka. So in the time, like this time, as opposed to ka 8, like a time. So ka 8 is definite article. Ka 8 means it's the indefinite article, like a time. So when you're saying the time, right, you're referring to a specific time that is already understood. So he says, Ka'et hazot, like this time, l'shana haba'ah, like next, not like, but next year, in the coming year. And Rashi goes on to say, Pesach haya. So, and it was Pesach. Ule Pesach haba nolad Yitzchak. And in fact, in the following Pesach, Isaac was born. So the tradition is that Isaac was born. There's a tradition that Isaac was actually born on the first day of Pesach. I could actually discuss something else on an aside, which is I happened to glance at the Siftei Chachamim, who asks the question, which might be in your minds as well: how does Rashi know this? How does he come up and say that this happened to be Pesach?
Well, the question on my mind is that I didn't think that it was Pesach yet.
All right. So, I mean, it just happened to be the time of Pesach. And perhaps at the time, I mean, I don't want to get overly historical over it, that maybe it was a shepherd, it was the time of the lambing and stuff. It was springtime. So at any rate, the way he would know, according to Siftei Chachamim, right, is that the tradition of, remember, in the previous Parsha, Abraham has this vision, and God says that his offspring will basically be enslaved for 400 years. Well, the slavery in Egypt wasn't 400 years. It was about 200 years. So the question is, how do we harmonize this, 400 years and the 200 years? And the answer is that, according to tradition, the prophecy came into being at the birth of Isaac. And so if you figure out from the birth of Isaac to the Exodus, it's 400 years. And so since they were redeemed on Pesach, that's when the freedom came. That's when that part of the prophecy came into being. So likewise, we have 400 years before Isaac being born to make that total of 400 years. So that's how we know that. There's also an implication of something else, because when the angels appear to Lot, he offers them matzahs. So just, obviously you can eat matzah any time of the year, but it could be, at least 30, from a literary point of view, there could be some suggestion there. All right, but that's not the issue so much. I just for the sake of completeness, and I thought you might be curious to share that. Okay. Midalo karinan K8, and he says part of the reason is that we want to refer. What Rashi seems to be saying is that since we say it's K8, like the time, well, the time would be Pesach. That's a time we recognize as a specific time. And he says, Midalo Karinan, and what he's saying here, even though there are no dots, K8 ella K8, and of course, without the dots, they're exactly the same. They look exactly the same. But that is the point that he's making, is that this is the tradition of how the Torah is to be read, right? Because when you take a Sefer Torah, you don't see any of these dots, right? But there's a tradition that the scribes follow of how the Torah has to be read, and it's K8. And that's the point that Rashi's making, right? So he says, Ka'ed chaya, ka'ed hazot, so it means, like this time, shetehe chaya lachem. So he says, where there will be life to you. Shetiyu kulchem shleimim kayamim, that you will all be whole and alive. Now, there is a footnote in the Silverman edition of the Rashi. I'm going to stop the share for a moment and just show you. So this is the book that I'm using, right? And there are other editions, but this particular edition has footnotes. And I want to read the footnote to you because he has a fairly lengthy footnote on this that I hope you will find interesting. So let me see if I can find it. Okay. Here we go. 1 second. All right. Sorry, I have to. Here it is. So we're looking up. There we are. All right. Just needed to find the proper reference here. So this is what it's saying. It is evident from his opening words that Rashi takes ka'et with the definite article to signify at this time, like kayom, like this day, right? And chaya, this is also the heart, even though chayim is something that we are familiar with, but normally chaya, when we see the word chaya, it could either mean third person feminine, right? She is alive, or chaya as a noun meaning an animal, right? And so you just can't translate it that way. But he understands chaya to signify, interesting now, next year. That's how he understands the word chaya, to mean next year. The phrase is then exactly parallel to ka'et machar. Now machar means tomorrow, and ka'et machar means this time tomorrow. And that's in Exodus 18. The words chaya and machar further defining the word ka'et. Rashi then goes on to explain how chaya comes to have this meaning, and what he has in mind may best be gathered. This was so interesting, I thought, from a passage. There's a dictionary by one of Rashi's teachers. He sometimes refers to him as Menachem. And there's a dictionary, Menachem's dictionary, where Menachem states, as Rashi does, that chaya denotes shana haba'ah, or shana acheret, which means next year, or another year. That's what the Hebrew means. Menachem continues, okay? I could read the Hebrew, but he gives the translation, all right? This is a colloquial expression, and the text, va'amartem kol lachai. So there's another expression that you find in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 6, where it says kol lachai, right? There's that word, lachai. And there it has the same meaning. It is a form of a blessing. When one visits, here we go, right? So what's the angel telling him? He's saying, next year at this time. And he says, when one visits a friend on an occasion where he is rejoicing, one blesses his friend, saying, a year and many years. This is Menachem's explanation of the words in 1 Samuel 25. And Rashi follows it in his comment of that verse. Here, however, Rashi is more explicit than Menachem, for he explains how the word chaya comes to have the meaning of next year. He holds that chaya, of course, means life, right? That's the simple definition, right? And that on any auspicious occasion, one says to his friend, may you have life to experience this joy again. So kol lachai means, just like now, kol, in the similar manner, lachai, you should be alive for that next time. With the suggestion of next year, hence chaya becomes a colloquial expression denoting next year. And this is a comment by the editor here, sort of saying, this is almost a parenthetical comment. Have we a survival of this in the utterance of the wish l'chaim when drinking with a friend? In other words, that understanding the word l'chaim simply meaning, let's be able to do this again next year. Same time. May we have life to drink again next year. And then he goes on just to comment about some later scholars. He's just the whoever it is who did the footnotes here is just having the best time with it, right? And he just comments on about other scholars and how they've also, right, tried to work on this expression. This is a challenging expression. And he makes the comment that some of these scholars thought they were coming up with a new explanation without recognizing that had they done their research more fully, they would realize that it was actually said hundreds and hundreds of years before that the same explanation had been given already. So I won't quote that. So just thought it was worth taking a little extra time here because this is such an unusual phrase, and what that footnote, the ideas that the footnote was sharing, I thought were very interesting, including understanding l'chaim a little bit differently. So,
have you ever heard anybody say kol echai? Is that something people still say?
I had heard it. Possibly not in modern Hebrew, but I actually had heard that expression even before I actually came across it in Samuel. Right? So, I mean, kol means like now, right? Something as, it's a comparison, a comparative term. So, like, next year, like now. That's how I would literally translate kol achai.
I feel like it's familiar.
Yes.
Maybe people used to say it when we were kids. I don't know. Was it like like a toast or a song? Maybe it was a song. I don't know.
There may be, actually, you're right. I can't think of the song, but you may well be right about that, Beth. Yeah, I know. Sometimes you scratch a little bit, and you dig around, and sometimes you come up with something really interesting. So I hope you enjoyed that, trying to get a little more understanding of that expression. I'll get back into the text now, so I'll go back to the screen share. All right, let's go on here. Okay, Shov Ashuv. So this is the angel speaking, right? And he says, I will certainly return. And Rashi says something I think very insightful here. He says, Lo besaro hamalach. The angel did not foretell, right, or announce sheyashuv elav, that he himself would return, even though that's literally what he's saying, right? It wasn't that the angel was telling him that he personally was going to return. Ela b'shlichuto shel makom. He was only saying this as a messenger from God. In other words, God was the one who was saying this, but through the angel. But it was God who was the one who would return in a year. Amar lo, okay, he said to him, this is the end of this other phrase, Bishlichut shel makom amar lo, end of phrase. He said to him, come on, and he gives a comparison. Vayomer la malach, it's just as when the angel said to her, harba arbe, okay, I shall greatly multiply. And this, I believe, is in the Akedah, right? Where the angel is saying that. V'hu ein biyado laharbot. Since when do angels have the power to multiply someone's offspring? Ela b'shlichuto shel makom. He was only saying this as the spokesman, right? As the emissary of God. Afkan b'shlichuto shel makom. And so here too, where it is possible, right, in the other case, the angels have nothing to do with it, right? But here, of course, the angel could theoretically appear again, but he wasn't. We clarify it. It's comparable. Only doing it as a messenger of God. Amar lechein, did he say this to him? And Rashi is giving his citation, Bereshit Rabbah. And now we have sort of an interesting addition here, because there's some compare and contrast, always helpful when trying to analyze literature, right? Elisha Amar Lashunamit. So I don't know how many of you are familiar. I suspect some of you are. It's actually a haftarah, right? Elisha said to the Shunammite woman, remember that story where the Shunammite woman arranges with her husband to have a little room for Elisha so that when he comes by, he has a place to stay, right? And Elisha says, "What can I do for you?" And he realizes they don't have a child. They have no child. And so he tells her, right? Lamo'ed hazeh, he says, at this same time, right? The expression is so similar to the one we have here in Genesis. And he says, Ka'et chaya, or I don't know if it says Ka'et chaya, I don't have the right. At choveket ben, you will hug a son, right? You'll embrace a son. Now, it's interesting, right? He doesn't say shov ashuv, and he simply says, you will embrace a son. Vatomer al adon. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Vatomer, and she said, I'm sorry. Okay. Adoni. So this could be okay. Adoni ish ha-Elohim. Okay. If somebody has the points, the vowels, please help me. Okay. My Lord, ish ha-Elohim, man of God. I think it's what? Techazev b'shivchatecha. Do not speak falsely to your maidservant. Right? I think it's al. I think it's don't. That's what this is. Vatomer. She said, don't, Adoni, Ish Elohim, man of God. Do not speak falsly to your maidservant. So this is what he's explaining now. Otan hamalachim, right? So those angels, shebasru et Sarah. This is what he says back to her in referring back. Okay, those angels that foretold Sarah, Amru Lamoed Ashuv. They said in the future. Okay, this is right. Sorry, she's still saying this. Rashi's explaining her words. Those angels that foretold Sarah, they said Lamoed Ashuv. Right? They said in next year I will return. So she's saying, you didn't say that. And the ones where the prophecy came true, they said, I will come, I will return. Amarla, so Elisha said back to her, responded to her, Otam hamalachim, those angels, shehem chayim v'kayamim le'olam, because angels live and exist forever. Amru lamoed ashuv. They were able to say, next year I will return. Aval ani, but I, basar vadam, I am merely mortal, right? Basar, flesh and blood. Shahayom chai, because today I can be alive. Va'amachar mate, and tomorrow I can be dead. Bein chai, but I'm saying to you, bein chai uvein mate, whether I personally am alive or whether I am dead, L'moed hazeh v'gomer. In next year, you will embrace a son. Okay. So, little phrase in the end of that sentence, v'hu acharav, and he was behind, or it was behind her. The he here is referring to hapetach. It's referring to the opening of the tent. Hapetach haya achar hamalach. What the Torah is saying is that the entrance of the tent was behind the angel. Onwards. So now the text goes on to sort of explain parenthetically. For Avraham v'Sarah zekenim, but Abraham and Sarah were elderly. Ba'im vayamim. They had many years. They were very old.
Was,
Go ahead.
was Abraham worried about being dying before he got the child?
No. What I was referring to was in the commentary in the Rashi that I was just saying, where Rashi was interpolating Elisha's words to the Shunammite woman. It's a whole different situation. Okay? And Elisha was explaining to the woman that he didn't use the same expression as the angels did to Abraham. They're assuming that they knew this story, and that he was saying it the way he did because he wasn't sure that he was going to be like an angel and necessarily be there next year. Okay, all right. So here we have that they're very elderly. Chadal liyot l'Sarah. It ceased for Sarah, orech kanashim, the manner or the way of women. Okay, so essentially, of course, we're talking about menstruation. She was no longer
How old were they? How old were they, Rabbi?
Well, Abraham was about 99 when he had his bris milah, and Sarah was 10 years younger.
Wow.
So she was like in her 80s. Okay, so Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born, and Sarah would have been 90. Yeah. All right. So here we go. Let's see here. Yeah, chadal liyot. So chadal liyot means pasak mimena. It had left her. Orech kanashim. So he's saying very specifically, even the Torah is speaking in euphemistic language, and he says orech nidot. Rashi just explains for clarification. He's talking about menstruation. Vatitzchak Sarah bekirba lemor, and Sarah laughed in her heart, saying, okay, and Rashi is going to actually translate these words quite literally. And you'll see, I don't want to anticipate what he's going to say now, but he's definitely looking at these words very, very carefully. And she says, Achare veloti, after I have faded, haita li edna, will there be refreshment? And edna can in fact mean menses, pleasure. Vadoni zaken, while my husband is elderly, he's old. Some lovely things that'll come out of this. We may not get to it today, but with God's help tomorrow at least. Okay, so it says bekirba, right? So basically we would understand that to mean that she was doing this silently, right? She laughed within herself. But he's going to take us in a different way, and he's going to understand the ba meaning at herself, right? At her innards. Mistakilet b'me'eha. She looked at her loins. Va'amra, and she thought, Efshar ha-krevim halalu, is it possible that these innards, te'unin v'lad, would carry a child? Hashadayim halalu, these breasts, shitsamku, which have shriveled up, moshchin chalav, could it be that you can draw milk from them? And that's the Tanchuma, he's saying. It's one of the Midrashim. So,
Yeah, but Rabbi, she's insulting God. That's a sin.
okay, let's hold on for a second, okay, please. We're just right now, trying to explain the words themselves, right? And whether she's sinning or not, I think it's very understandable that she would look at her body and say, is this body capable of having a child? So there's a certain understandable level of disbelief and frustration in a way. Like if you were promised something that was absolutely phenomenal and unbelievable, how would you feel about it? And I think in that way the Shunammite woman is saying the same thing to Elisha. When you get promised something that's too good to be, it's too good to be true. Literally, that's what we're talking about, right? So we'll need to stop here and continue with God's help tomorrow. And I'm going to put in the little mark. So hopefully tomorrow we will continue. So I'm going to stop the share and thank those who've joined us, and stop the recording.